I woke up one morning to find my backyard fence smashed down, tire tracks running right through my freshly planted garden, and Karen, my neighbor from 2 doors down, waving from her car like she hadn't just turned my property into her personal shortcut. Asterisk, I always believed in minding my own business. After all, I'd worked hard for the life I had, a quiet home at the edge of the neighborhood, tucked behind a line of pine trees with a wide backyard and a modest garden where I spent most of my early mornings with a cup of coffee in one hand and my dog Sam by my side. I'd never had issues with the neighbors before. Sure, there were the usual suburban complaints, barking dogs, noisy parties, the occasional lost delivery package, but nothing that ever escalated. That was until Karen moved in 2 doors down. Karen arrived with noise. Not the kind you hear, but the kind you feel, like a thunderstorm rolling in slowly, its presence known even before the first crack of lightning. She had a shiny SUV that took up half the street when parked, and she always seemed to be in a rush, like she was too important for stop signs or driveways. At first I chalked it up to new neighbor stress. Everyone has a little chaos during moving week, but the weeks turned into months. And the chaos didn't go away, it got worse. I didn't have a front row seat to most of her antics, which usually involved yelling at delivery drivers, arguing with the trash collectors, or knocking on people's doors to correct something she didn't like. But I started to take notice when I noticed something strange in my backyard. Tire tracks. Not just the odd set from a misplaced turn, but deep, repeated tracks that ran along the fence line and curved through the back portion of my property like a shortcut. I stood over them in disbelief. My first thought was maybe some utility worker had come through, but no notice. No trucks, no warning. Then came Sam's barking. It was a Thursday morning, bright, cool air, birds chirping, the kind of morning you wish could last all day. Sam suddenly bolted to the back corner of the yard, growling. I followed quickly and caught sight of a silver SUV backing out of my yard and onto the connecting street behind the neighborhood. My jaw dropped. It wasn't just anyone, it was Karen. She looked at me through the window, gave a two-finger wave like we were buddies, and drove off. I stood there, stunned, staring at the gaping hole where my fence used to be. My fence was no fancy structure, just a standard 6-foot wooden barrier that marked the end of my property. It had stood untouched for years, weathered but strong. Now, several panels had been ripped away, tire marks scarring the grass and flower beds I'd planted just a few weeks before. I marched down to her place, knocked. A firm, polite knock. No need to start a war. Yet. She opened the door, not surprised to see me, almost like she'd been waiting. "Oh hey," she said, chewing gum. "About the fence. I hope you're not upset." It was in the way. I blinked. In the way of what? My shortcut. It takes forever going around the block. Your yard connects directly to the back road. I stared at her, waiting for a punchline. "You destroyed my fence." "Relax," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like you were using that part of the yard, I mean. Look at it, just grass and some weeds." "Weeds?" I asked, my voice rising. "That's my land, Karen." "Don't get so emotional," she sighed. "Just build another one. But maybe leave it open this time. Yeah, save us both some trouble." I left before I said something I'd regret. She didn't care. There wasn't a trace of remorse in her tone. To her, I was just an inconvenience in the way of her shortcut. I called a local handyman and spent the weekend rebuilding the fence myself. Stronger this time, steel posts sunk deep into the ground. Thick wooden panels, crossbeams, the works. Sam sat by my side the whole time, ears perked like he knew this wasn't just a fix, but a warning. 3 days later, it was gone again. This time, I didn't see it happen, but the tire tracks told the story. She hadn't just driven through, she had plowed through, breaking panels and pulling one of the posts completely out of the ground. I looked over at Sam, who stood stiff with his fur bristling, as if he, too, had had enough. I called the police. The officer who showed up was polite, but non-committal. He took photos, scribbled notes, and eventually knocked on Karen's door. I watched from a distance, unable to hear the conversation but able to see everything. The way she crossed her arms, tilted her head, smiled like a kid trying to talk her way out of detention. A few minutes later, the officer returned to me. "She says she thought the land back there was communal," he said carefully. "It's not," I snapped, handing him my property map. "It's mine. She's trespassing. She destroyed my property. Twice," he nodded. "I understand, but unfortunately, this is a civil matter. If you want to press charges or file for damages, you'll have to take her to small claims court. That's it. I'd recommend putting up signage," he added, "and maybe a camera. That way you've got evidence next time." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I thanked him, and after he left, I stood in the middle of my wrecked backyard and took a deep breath. Karen had crossed a line. Not once, but twice. And if the law couldn't stop her now, I needed a smarter plan, one that wouldn't just teach her a lesson but would ensure she never saw my property as hers again. That night, I sat at my dining room table with the property deed in front of me, alongside my laptop. I didn't just want to confirm that the backyard was mine. I wanted to understand every inch of boundary I owned. I zoomed in on the lot lines, and that's when something interesting caught my eye. The narrow strip of wooded land that ran between my property and Karen's driveway, the very land she used as her shortcut, wasn't owned by her. In fact, it wasn't even part of our housing development. It was owned by an old holding company based 2 towns over, probably overlooked when the area was developed. A forgotten patch of land. I leaned back in my chair, thinking, if Karen thought she could take what wasn't hers, maybe it was time I did something she'd really hate. By the following afternoon, I was on the phone with the holding company. To my surprise, the land was available for sale. Cheap too. The rep said it was too small to develop and mostly used as an access path by some residents. I didn't care. I wired the money the next day, and within a week the deed was in my name. I owned the shortcut now, and Karen had no idea, not yet. Owning that narrow strip of land changed everything, not just legally, but emotionally. For the first time since Karen started bulldozing her entitlement through my life, I felt like I was finally back in control. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about restoring boundaries. Literally, it was about the simple, forgotten truth that people should respect what isn't theirs, and Karen had made it very clear she didn't. The paperwork went through faster than I expected. The moment I received the email with the official deed in my name, I printed it, placed it neatly in a folder, and put it on the counter like a trophy. I took another sip of my coffee, glancing out the window. There she was, Karen, her SUV into her driveway like she owned the block. I watched her for a moment longer, then turned to Sam, who wagged his tail as if he sensed what was coming. Let's go, buddy, I muttered. Time to build something better. The plan wasn't just to replace the fence she had destroyed twice. It was to rebuild it, extend it, and include the land I now legally owned, land that she had wrongly assumed she could drive through any time she pleased. The best part, by enclosing that strip, I wouldn't be cutting her off from public access. She still had her driveway, but I would be sealing off her little escape route to the back road. No more shortcuts, no more unauthorized joyrides through my garden. I called a fencing contractor that same afternoon and explained the situation. I asked them to work fast, preferably overnight if possible, and offered a small bonus for the rush. The lead guy was a no-nonsense type named Phil, with hands like bricks and a quiet way of nodding when he understood something fully. You're saying she's been cutting through here? He asked, walking the new boundary line with me twice. She drove through, knocked down the fence both times. This stretch right here, I pointed, used to be owned by a holding company. It's mine now. I want it blocked off. Phil whistled and gave me a small grin. Bet she's not gonna like that. She doesn't have to, I said. Just build it strong. By the following evening we had posts in the ground. Steel, not wood this time, reinforced, 8 feet high. We worked mostly in the dark with floodlights so Karen wouldn't catch on too early. I wasn't looking for a fight, I just wanted to finish the fence and wake up in a world where Karen wasn't able to tear down my property like it was made of cardboard. The crew finished just after midnight. By sunrise I was back outside inspecting the work. It was beautiful. Clean lines, solid gates, motion-triggered lights at the corners. Sam ran along the new boundary, sniffing curiously and giving a satisfied bark, as if approving the new kingdom. The narrow pass Karen used was now completely blocked off. No gaps, no access. I made coffee and waited. At exactly 8:07 a.m., I heard the SUV engine start. From the living room window, I watched as Karen backed out, turned around, and pointed toward the back alley like she always did. It was her morning routine, cutting through my land to avoid waiting at the neighborhood's only stop sign. But this time, she stopped abruptly, slammed the brakes. Really, her window rolled down. Her head popped out. She stared at the wall of steel that now boxed her in. She got out of the car, walked up to the fence and started examining it like she was looking for a secret door. Then she noticed the private property, no trespassing sign screwed into the panel. She looked around like she was expecting cameras, or maybe hoping she was dreaming. When she spotted me standing calmly in my yard with Sam at my side, she stomped over. "You can't do this," she shouted, still in her robe. "I did do this," I replied. "This isn't legal." "It's very legal. This land belongs to me. Here's the deed if you want to see it." I held up the folder and opened it to show her. Karen didn't even read it. She just glared at me like I had personally insulted her existence. "That's my shortcut," she barked. "No, Karen, that was my backyard. And now the shortcut you liked so much is mine too. You're being petty. You know how long it takes me to go the long way." "I do. That's why I suggested you respect my property before." She huffed and puffed and stormed back to her SUV. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. By lunchtime, Karen had called the HOA. 2 board members came by unannounced to inspect the situation. I greeted them with calm courtesy, as I always had. They were both middle-aged men, clipboard types who wore matching polo shirts and overly serious expressions. "We've received a complaint about a new fence being constructed overnight," one of them said stiffly. "That's correct," I said, leading them around the backyard. "It's on my property. You'll find all construction complies with local code and HOA guidelines. Here's a copy of the boundary map." They looked it over, their eyebrows lifted. "This strip here, it wasn't part of your original lot, was it?" "No, it wasn't. I bought it last week. Here's the deed. The second man squinted at it, then looked at me. So Karen's been driving across it without permission? Correct, he nodded. The first man sighed. Well, in that case, it's outside our jurisdiction. As long as the fence height meets regulations, you're in the clear. It does. I double-checked. The HOA left with no further comment. Karen, however, was livid. She stood in her driveway later that evening, pacing and yelling on her phone loudly enough for the whole block to hear. Words like lawyer, unfair, and sue echoed through the air like sirens. But I wasn't worried. I hadn't broken a single rule. If anything, I'd gone above and beyond to keep it clean that night. I got a knock at the door. It wasn't Karen, it was her husband. I hadn't seen him much before. He was quiet, older, and seemed more like a background character in the soap opera Karen starred in. He stood there awkwardly, hands in pockets, eyes downcast. I just wanted to ask, he said slowly, is there any way you'd consider taking the fence down, or maybe just leaving a gate? She's having a really hard time with this. I sighed and shook my head. She had multiple chances. I asked her nicely, twice. She laughed in my face and tore down my fence. I'm not doing this to be mean. I'm doing it because she left me no choice. He nodded. Yeah, I figured. Just thought I'd ask. He left without another word. The next morning, I found tire marks in front of the new gate. She had tried to ram it, no damage to the fence, but the mark was obvious, a desperate move. I filed a police report just to document it. The responding officer rolled his eyes when I explained the situation. Apparently, it wasn't the first time Karen had tried to force her will on someone through creative driving. You're not the only one who's put up a fence, he said. You might be the only one. She underestimated this bad, though. I chuckled. She'll get used to the long way. She doesn't have a choice now, he replied, tapping the gate with his knuckle for the first time in weeks. I slept soundly. No crashes, no barking, no shouting. Just peace. The kind of peace you only get when someone learns the hard way that your property line isn't just a suggestion, it's a wall. And in Karen's case, after a week of silence, I thought the storm had passed. Karen stopped yelling. Her SUV hadn't slammed into the new fence again. And for the first time in months, my mornings returned to the quiet, peaceful rhythm I loved. Sam and I resumed our early walks along the fence line. And I even started reseeding the patches of torn-up grass that had been destroyed by her tires. It felt good, the way home was supposed to feel. But I should have known better. Karen wasn't the type to walk away without a final blow. It started with mail, not hers, mine. I opened a letter one morning from the county zoning office, and my heart skipped a beat when I read the subject line. Complaint regarding unauthorized structure on residential property. The complaint claimed my new fence violated visibility restrictions and setback requirements. It was anonymous, of course, but I didn't need a signature to know where it came from. Karen. I took a deep breath, grabbed the folder with my permits, deeds, and the copy of the HOA approval, and drove straight to the zoning office. I spoke with a man named Harris who reviewed everything with a tired expression. He clearly wasn't new to neighbors at war. Everything checks out, he said finally. Whoever filed this complaint either didn't understand property law or assumed you didn't follow the rules. They were hoping to cause trouble, I said calmly. Well, they wasted our time, but you're fine. Just keep copies of everything on hand in case they try again. I walked out of that office with a quiet satisfaction that the seed had been planted. Karen wasn't done. She might have lost the shortcut, but she was shifting to a new battlefield: bureaucracy, petty complaints, legal loopholes, bending rules. She wasn't going to use brute force anymore. Now she was aiming to wear me down one paper cut at a time. The next complaint came 3 days later, this time through the HOA. It claimed I was operating an unpermitted commercial garden on the property. Let me be clear. I had a small vegetable patch, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, a few herbs. I didn't sell a thing. The garden was for personal use. The idea that it was some kind of black market produce operation was laughable. But once again, I had to take time out of my day to respond, submit photos, and attend an HOA meeting just to defend the existence of my basil plants. At the meeting, Karen showed up. She didn't say a word, just sat in the back corner, arms crossed, lips tight, glaring at me like I was the villain in some imaginary war she had invented. I ignored her. I kept my answers direct, my paperwork clean, and my temper in check. The HOA board dismissed the complaint without much discussion. Another win for me, another defeat for her, but she didn't stop. She changed tactics again. This time, it was noise complaints. Every few days, I'd see a police cruiser slowly roll down the street. One of them even stopped by and told me they were following up on reports of late-night construction and disturbances. I was baffled. I hadn't so much as hammered a nail since the fence went up. I told them that I even invited them inside to look around. One officer chuckled. Honestly, your place is the quietest house on the block, but we have to respond when someone calls. He didn't say Karen's name, but he didn't have to. I started documenting everything: dates, times, recordings from the security cameras I'd installed during the fence rebuild. I wasn't going to let a paper war bury me. If Karen wanted to play that game, I'd be ready with receipts, timestamps, and enough legal documentation to fill a filing cabinet. Then came the boldest move yet. She built a gate. I came home one evening to find that she had installed a small wooden gate at the back corner of her property, one that opened directly into the newly fenced strip I had purchased. The strip that legally belonged to me. I couldn't believe it. She had literally cut a hole into her own fence and placed a gate facing mine, a clear passive-aggressive message. I still went through it was so absurd, I actually laughed. But the laughter quickly turned into anger. She had no right to put a gate there. That land was mine. She had no easement, no access, and certainly no permission. I took photos and called my attorney, who was now on retainer thanks to Karen's constant attempts to drag me into legal nonsense. She's poking the bear, he said dryly. But unless she steps foot onto your land or damages your fence, again, it's not illegal to put a gate facing it. It's petty, not criminal. Then we'll make it irrelevant, I replied. That weekend, I planted a row of thorny bushes along my side of the fence, thick, fast-growing shrubs that would eventually form a natural wall. I also installed a motion-activated floodlight, pointed directly at her gate. Every time she opened it, even a crack, the yard lit up like a prison yard. The message was clear: you're not welcome here. Karen didn't respond directly, but I noticed she stopped using the gate. Eventually she put a trash bin in front of it, like it had never been there in the first place. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had given up, but she had one more surprise in store. I got home one afternoon and found a man standing near my front steps, clipboard in hand, badge on his chest. "Mr. Tolland," he asked. "That's me. I'm with the County Property Division. We've had a request for a boundary inspection." My stomach dropped. A request from who? He didn't say, but again, I already knew. He explained that someone had claimed my new fence might have been built over the property line. A dispute like that could trigger a forced resurvey which, if ruled against me, could require dismantling the entire structure. But I was ready. I brought him the survey I had commissioned when I bought the land. The GPS coordinates, the notarized documents from the county recorder's office, and the digital maps marked by the licensed surveyor. I even showed him the steel boundary markers buried in the ground that matched the coordinates exactly. After 2 hours of walking the line and comparing data, he turned to me and said, "You're in the clear. Actually, this is one of the most precise boundary surveys I've seen." I let out a breath. I didn't realize I'd been holding as he packed up to leave. I asked him, "Do people really go through all this trouble, filing fake claims, inspections, complaints?" He chuckled. "Oh yeah, it's always the same kind of neighbor, too. The kind who can't stand being told no." I smiled. "Yeah, I know the type." Karen watched him leave from her driveway. She didn't say a word. But for the first time since this whole mess began, I noticed something new in her eyes. Doubt, not rage, not confidence. Just the quiet, creeping realization that she was running out of moves. I went back inside, sat on the porch, and watched the sunset over my newly planted shrubs. Sam laid beside me, head on his paws, breathing slow and calm. I poured myself a drink, not because the battle was over, but because for once I knew I was winning. Godkin had tried to control me with chaos, complaints, and intimidation. But every attack only made me more prepared, stronger, sharper. Didn't just defend my home, I rebuilt it into a fortress. And now, with the law on my side and a folder of evidence thicker than a phone book, there was nothing she could do but watch. She wanted a shortcut. What she got was a dead end. The days that followed the boundary inspection were unusually quiet. No strange visitors, no surprise inspections, no cops knocking on my door for phantom noise complaints. The silence felt unnatural at first, like the eye of a storm too, still, too calm. Sam noticed it too. He'd often sit near the back door, ears perked, watching the fence line like a soldier on guard. But there was nothing, not a sound, not even Karen's usual slamming of her car door or her grumbling at delivery drivers. Part of me was suspicious. The other part started to relax. I got back into my old rhythm. Early morning walks with Sam, tending to the garden, reading on the porch. It felt like I had reclaimed my life. But even as peace settled over the property, I didn't forget who Karen was. I didn't take down the cameras or lower the motion lights. I didn't want another surprise. About 2 weeks into the calm, something changed. It was a Friday evening when I noticed the real estate sign. I was pulling weeds along the fence when I spotted it not in my yard, but on Karen's front lawn, a bright white post with a red sign swinging in the breeze, "For sale by owner." My hands froze mid-pull. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and stared at it, not quite believing what I was seeing. Was she really giving up? Karen's SUV was in the driveway, but her blinds were drawn. The front porch was empty. Sam barked once, then stopped as if confused too. After months of fighting, of complaints, of games, was she actually leaving? The idea sent a ripple of relief through me, but I didn't let myself celebrate just yet. Karen had proven time and again that she thrived on theatrics. For all I knew, it could be a bluff, another move in her never-ending game of suburban chess. Still, I couldn't help myself. I made a fresh pot of coffee and sat on the porch, just watching. watching for signs, watching for answers. Around sunset, Karen finally emerged. She stood on her porch in a faded sweater, arms crossed, eyes scanning the street like she was trying to predict the future. She noticed me. Our eyes met. I raised my mug slightly. She didn't wave. She didn't smirk. She just turned and went back inside. 2 days later, an unfamiliar car showed up, a black sedan with tinted windows and a man in a button-down shirt holding a leather binder. A real estate agent, maybe. He knocked on Karen's door, and they talked for about 10 minutes. He walked the property with her, jotting things down, pointing at the backyard, then back to the street. He looked confused at one point, probably when he saw the useless gate she'd built that now opened to a wall of thorny bushes and steel. Whatever they discussed didn't seem to go well. The man left without taking a single photo. Karen looked tense, agitated. She stood outside for a long time after he left, pacing in small circles. I didn't bother asking her what was going on. I already had a good idea. She was stuck. Her war with me had boxed her in, literally and figuratively. The land she used to access had been bought out from under her. Her shortcut was gone, her gate was worthless, and her tantrums had become neighborhood gossip. No one wanted to live next to the woman who tried to drive through someone's yard and lost. Later that evening, I got a knock on the door. I opened it to find another surprise, Karen's husband. Again. He looked tired, more tired than the last time. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his shoulders slouched like he'd been carrying a weight too heavy for too long. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. "She's trying to sell," he said, getting straight to the point. "I noticed, but no one wants to buy." I can't say I'm surprised. She's not telling the truth in the listings. She says she has dual access to the street and alley, but when buyers come and see your fence, they realize it's a lie. He nodded. "She blames you," he added. "I'm not shocked by that either." He paused, ran a hand over his face, and looked at me for the first time, really looked. "I'm sorry for all of it. I should have stepped in sooner. She doesn't handle being told no, ever. I figured that out around the time she demolished my fence." He gave a sad chuckle. "We're probably going to get divorced. She can't let this go. She doesn't sleep. She just stares at the backyard like it personally betrayed her." I didn't know what to say to that. He stood there a moment longer, then said, "If there's any chance you'd consider selling her back that strip of land, even just a sliver to make her property look whole again, I think it would help." "No," I said calmly. "Absolutely not." He didn't argue. He just nodded again, thanked me for listening, and left. And that was it. Karen's last move, the one she probably thought would undo all of mine, had failed before it even began. Over the next week, I saw more potential buyers arrive. None stayed long. Some didn't even get out of their cars. The online listing had been updated to say, "Charming home with unique layout," which was code for boxed in by your neighbor's iron will. Karen started looking more and more unkempt. Each day, her car was dusty, her garden overgrown, and her porch cluttered with old boxes. Then one morning she was gone, just like that. The SUV wasn't in the driveway. Her blinds were open for the first time in months, no signs of life. I waited a few days, unsure if she was on vacation or just hiding. But by the third day, a moving truck arrived. 2 men started hauling furniture out. I walked by and asked where it was going. "Storage," one of them said. "Owner said she's renting a place across town for now." Across town, away from here. She was really gone. That evening, I stood in the backyard again, the golden light of sunset casting long shadows across the fence that had started it all. Sam lay by my side, tail thumping softly against the grass. The air was quiet, not tense, not watchful, just quiet. I walked the full length of the property line, ran my hand along the fence panels, and smiled. Karen thought I was just another neighbor she could push around, another silent bystander who'd cave the moment things got messy. But I wasn't. I never was. I didn't fight with fists or anger. I fought with patience, with facts, with strategy. And in the end, I won, not just because I was right, but because I didn't let her chaos turn into mine. She wanted a shortcut. What she got instead was a long, hard lesson in respect, and I got my peace back. For a moment, the silence was beautiful. I stood at the edge of my newly installed fence, 8 feet of reinforced steel topped with smooth security railing, watching the early morning sun pour golden light over my yard. The land was quiet now. No tire tracks, no broken posts, no laughter from Karen's porch mocking me. There was just peace, the kind I hadn't had since Karen took it upon herself to turn my property into a shortcut. But the silence didn't last. It was 6:45 a.m. when I first heard her screams. A shrill, furious voice echoed across the block. "You can't do this to me. This is illegal." Karen's voice cracked from her second-story window, her face twisted in disbelief. She had just discovered the truth. She was fenced in. The shortcut she'd claimed, stomped through, and bulldozed over was now a cleanly demarcated boundary. My land. And the strip of land beyond that. Also mine now, legally purchased and recorded with the county clerk. Karen's vehicle sat awkwardly in her backyard, facing my new fence like it was a prison wall. And in a way it was. The only way out now was reversing a good 200 feet down a narrow, twisting alley that she could barely manage with her oversized SUV. Her face was red hair wild, and she looked more panicked than I'd ever seen her. I didn't say a word. I just sipped my coffee on the porch, watching her fall apart from a distance. Within an hour, 2 police cruisers pulled up. Of course she called them. She always did when she didn't get her way. But this time was different. I greeted the officers at the edge of my property with a folder of paperwork, survey records, warranty deeds, photos, witness statements from neighbors, even the building permit for the new fence. Everything in order, everything legal. Karen, in her robe and flip-flops, stormed over to interrupt. He locked me in. This is false imprisonment. He's violating my rights. The officer held up a hand and calmly responded, "Ma'am, you're on your property and he's on his. There's no violation here." But he blocked my access. "Actually," I said, finally speaking, "you never had legal access across my yard. You just helped yourself." The younger officer nodded. "And that land along the back boundary, that's his too. We've confirmed it." Karen's mouth fell open. "So I can't even use my shortcut anymore, ma'am," the officer said firmly. "There was never a shortcut. There was trespassing." That was the turning point. The look on Karen's face wasn't just anger now, it was realization. She had pushed too far, too long. She had gotten used to manipulating neighbors, sweet-talking HOA board members, and steamrolling anyone who dared say no to her. But this time, she met someone who fought back. Not with shouting or pettiness, but with paperwork, boundaries, and cold, quiet revenge. The officers left, and Karen, for the first time, had no backup. Days passed. She stopped yelling, stopped mocking. Her porch was quiet. Her blinds were always drawn, and her SUV didn't move for a week. When she finally did back it out of her yard, the scraping sound of her tires grazing the narrow fence alley was almost musical. Her once grand shortcut was now a tightrope walk of humiliation, every inch reminding her of the war she started and lost. But I wasn't done yet. I decided to reclaim my yard, not just with fences and deeds, but with beauty. I hired a landscaper and transformed the old shortcut path into a peaceful walking garden. Pavers lined the once damaged grass, surrounded by raised flower beds, solar lanterns, and a small bubbling fountain right where her tires used to tear through the centerpiece. A small wooden sign, "Respect the fence, respect the peace." Neighbors came by and complimented the change. One even joked, "You ought to charge admission to walk through this place." We laughed, but they knew the fence was more than a barrier now. It was a symbol. The HOA, which had once quietly sided with Karen or looked the other way, now issued a community-wide reminder about respecting property boundaries. A few board members even stopped by to formally apologize for the confusion and thanked me for handling the issue with dignity. I smiled, nodded, and didn't bother reminding them how silent they were when it mattered. As for Karen, well, her social circle shrank. People started to distance themselves. After all, no one wants to be associated with the neighbor who trespasses and vandalizes. Word spread fast, and once the police had come out multiple times, always siding with me, her power began to crumble. One late afternoon, as I trimmed the new rose bushes by the edge of the garden, Karen slowly approached the fence. She didn't yell, didn't wave, just stood there, one hand nervously clutching her elbow. "I just wanted to say," she began, eyes lowered, "I didn't mean for it to get so bad. I kept trimming. I thought it was harmless. I just needed a quicker way through, and I didn't think it mattered." "You thought it didn't matter to me," I replied, not even looking up. There was a long pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. I was wrong. I finally turned to her. She looked smaller now, somehow, not just physically but in presence. Her confidence, once boiling over, was now reduced to a simmer. And while part of me felt a hint of satisfaction, another part that just wanted to live in peace felt a bit of release. "Thank you," I said. "It takes something to admit that. We didn't become friends, but the war ended right there." From then on, Karen kept to her yard. The new fence remained untouched. The garden thrived. My mornings were quiet again. I no longer had to wake up wondering what had been broken or what excuse I'd hear next. The boundary I built gave me more than just a barrier. It gave me back my peace of mind. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just about a fence or a shortcut. It was about respect for space, for people, for boundaries. Karen had spent years bulldozing over whatever she wanted, but life finally gave her something she couldn't cross. Not because I stopped her with force, but because I stopped playing her game and started writing the rules. And when you respect yourself enough to set a boundary, the world learns to respect it too. For more real stories that show the power of standing your ground, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel, Bright Reality. Every fence has a story. Come see what happens when someone crosses the line.